Nick C. One of the tools Scientology uses for attracting new members is the so-called Oxford Capacity Analysis. For the benefit of the fellow listeners, the OCA has no relation to either the city or the university. It is a questionnaire devised by Ray Kemp in 1959 and eventually attributed to Hubbard. The test is administered to random passerbys, often in public spaces, such as street fairs. The OCA consists of 200 questions. After the respondent answers the questions, test results are printed out in the form of a graph, and the person administering the test explains to the respondent what the graph supposedly shows. The OCA is supposedly designed to elicit problem areas in the respondent's life. In reality, its purpose is to entice the test subject into visiting the local org to find out how Dianetics and Scientology can help them with the problems supposedly identified by testing. Please correct me if my description is off. I have heard that very rarely the OCA produces results that the person administering the test must interpret as, "We can't help you." Is this true? If so, what would produce this kind of outcome? Would it be a trouble-free person or an irredeemable basket case, or is it something else entirely? All right, Nick, thank you very much for this well-described question here. And I will say only to correct you that the OCA is not really used in street fairs or out on the street to get people into the churches or the orgs. There are testing centers that are set up to bring people in so that they will get tested, and then they could get sent off to the major org if they have a remote test center sort of set up. But very, 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 very few places have anything like that. I think Seattle is the only one that comes to mind right away. And so usually they do it in the org, and the sort of outreach activity you describe more often now is, and has been for forever, is pinch tests. And with the meter, they do these things called stress tests, and they try to entice you with the e-meter, and it's a scientific rendering of your day-to-day problems. And that's what's supposed to entice you to then buy a book, which then gets you into the org, or they'll try to schedule to come into the org to do the testing there. And they control the whole line and kind of run you through it. And the idea is that you come in, you do the test, you wait for the results, they sit down, they interpret the results for you, and then they try to sell you something based on those results. So most of what you described is 100% accurate. So that all being said, in terms of what kind of results you could get, there isn't a result that I'm aware of, and I did OCA evaluations, and I read the materials when I was in the church about OCAs and about how they are graded. I did grading. I understood the testing manuals. I was pretty familiar with it. It wasn't a passing thing for me. And I never saw a result that was, okay, kick the guy out the door. But there are a couple results that come to mind for me that might make a test interpreter or a salesperson give up more easily on whether somebody is a prospect or not. And I thought of off the top of my head 3 things. Now, of course, maybe there is, because there have been changes in Scientology since I left, I always have to allow for the fact that maybe Miscavige introduced some idea that there are people who come in who can do a test, and there are certain results that are just unacceptable. But that wasn't the case as of 2013 when I left. So what I can say about this is there's actually, you might be interested to know, there's very little from L. Ron Hubbard himself on what the OCA actually means, what the test results are. He was pretty broad in his interpretations of how the test works. And he said that if the test is low on the left and low on the right, in other words, if it was kind of an arc kind of a graph, or it was low here and then it kind of went up and in the middle area and then crashed on the right, that meant that the person was out of valence and psychotic, which means they were being out of valence means you're being somebody else. You've cloaked another personality over yours, and you're now exhibiting behavior and symptoms or behavior and language and mannerisms that are very much like somebody else's personality that you've taken on. That's called being in somebody else's valence in Scientology. And a valence is a word in Scientology for a personality or a package of of behaviors and ideas and mannerisms and stuff that would demonstrate a person's personality. So you find people out of valence by being their mother or being their father or being some famous person or being an authority figure who they think they need to emulate. And it becomes, in Scientology, it's sort of formulated as a subconscious construct more so than something that you're knowingly doing. But clearly, you're doing it because you feel either inadequate yourself or you feel that this other personality is benefiting you somehow. Hubbard said to one degree or another, everybody's out of valence because you have a body, because you are influenced by other people, and the true core essential thing that is you wouldn't really want to be involved with any of this anyway, right? So to that degree of even being here, you're out of valence. But with the test, with the OCA, it means you're really in somebody else's headspace. And the answers apparently are supposed to reflect that. Somehow they're supposed to be able to divine that this is true of you by answering questions like, do you like to browse railway timetables when you're bored? Or are you generally happy? Or do you feel that the modern system of prison without bars is doomed to failure? These are the kind of questions you're answering in this test, right? And it's supposed to determine these deep, things about you and your identity, which is just nonsensically silly. But that's the result, is low on the left, and then low on the right means you're radically, horribly, terribly out of communication. So low on the left means you're basically very unhappy, out of sorts, not getting along with other people very well. And low on the right, out of communication, low responsibility, I believe, means that you are psychotic. So those two things together could tell a test evaluator, maybe this isn't somebody I want to spend a lot of time on. But that's all according to the individual test evaluator or salesperson to make that call. I never saw anywhere in Scientology materials that a person who is low on the left and low on the right is unteachable or is unsellable or is somebody we shouldn't sign up. But it occurs to me that might be one reason somebody might look at that test result and go, oh, wow. Another one is if the test results are all along the top. Just a nice, even, everything's around 100, 90, 80 band. Because the test goes at the top is 100, then it goes down to 0, and then it goes down to minus 100. So you can have negative results along the bottom and very, very positive results along the top. So if all I think there's 10 personality traits that are graphed on the OCA. And if they're all along the top, then you are considered what's called in Scientology theedy-weedy. You're a theedy-weedy case. And a theedy-weedy case is defined as somebody who never, ever did anything wrong to anybody and could never even conceive of doing anything wrong to anybody ever. I mean, you get this idea that it's somebody who is living a life of pure delusion, even according to L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology standards. They're just irresponsible, grossly so irresponsible, so not themselves, out of valence even, that they act as though the world is nothing but sweetness and light and everybody's doing the best they can possibly do and isn't everything wonderful. And it's very kind of Pollyannish, very everything's great. That's theedy-weedy, right? Oh, I could just never imagine doing anything wrong to anybody. That really grated on Hubbard's nerves, that kind of attitude, and he called that a theedy-weedy case. And if a person comes in and fills out an OCA and there's nothing wrong, you're probably looking at a theedy-weedy person because everybody's got something wrong with them, and everybody usually has enough self-awareness to know something's up with them, even if they're not necessarily willing to tell you about it. And the test results are supposed to reflect that. So that could be another reason why a salesperson might pass or go, yeah, well, this isn't really for you, and just kind of move along. Finally, the third reason I came up with as to why this might occur, why it might be that a person will come in and do the test, get their results, and the person says, yeah, we really can't do a whole lot for you, is it might be that result comes after the salesperson already tries to get the person, tries to question them, ask them about their test results, go, poke and prod and get the person talking. And the person doesn't talk. They won't talk. They won't say anything. They won't open up. They're just not into telling this stranger about themselves and their personal life and their personal problems. And so if the test evaluator or the salesperson can't break through, then they'll give up. They could easily give up. I mean, you're only going to go so far with somebody, especially on the front lines. When somebody's already an established Scientologist and they've already, sort of drunk the flavor aid, so to speak, and they're in, then you can you can really apply a lot more pressure to them, and you can, wear them down, and then you can spend hours working them over, and you're doing that for significantly more money than what you're doing at the beginning opening gate, where you're just trying to sell the guy a book, get him a cheap course, get him some cheap auditing, and get him started. So, so the amount of time you're going to put into that is going to be significantly less. And those are the three things I could come up with, and I hope that gives some clarification to how that works.